Well, good evening, listeners. This is the first podcast episode of 2026, which is very exciting. The holidays were a very hectic time, as I was just talking with Karen about, who was here on the podcast with me. And she was very kind to reschedule this interview for after the holidays. But I'm very excited for this year, excited to see what happens. I think we ended on the 254th episode last year, so we are chugging along and excited for all the people that we've met. And I'm speaking today with Karen Dotrice, and she is if any of you remember Mary Poppins, the original Mary Poppins, because there's been a remake of Mary Poppins, but the original one, there were the two kids who were the center of the film. Obviously, Julie Andrews, and you have Dick Van Dyke and all of them. But she was the young girl. And I just remember I grew up with the film. I still watch the film. I always loved it. And I wondered what had happened to some of the characters. Now, of course, many of the actors had passed away. Dick Van Dyke just turned 100, and Karen was actually part of a documentary, PBS documentary special that came out last month to celebrate his 100th birthday. But, and the little boy in the film passed away. So she is the last surviving child of the duo. But I came across it. I found she was alive and that she was active in life, doing things that she loved. Obviously, she's not acting anymore, but she still makes appearances now and then to talk about Mary Poppins. And so it's such a gift to have you, Karen. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Danielle. This is a total joy, and I'm sorry for the fact we had to postpone a little bit, but such is life, right?
Yes. No,
But we're here.
yes, and I appreciate your patience with it. It was interesting because so many people this holiday season for me were going through a lot of things unexpected, like chronic illness, just a lot of things that made it a little damp on the spirit. But I wanted to ask you, I've wondered, how does it feel for you, now decades later, people still talk about Mary Poppins. I was in Sunday school the other day, and I have this little boy in my Sunday school who loves to talk about all these old movies his mom is showing him now, from when she grew up. And he was telling me just this past Sunday about Dick Van Dyke and Stepping Time, and that was like his favorite scene is where all the coal and the smoke comes down on them as they come down the chimney. And he just turned 7. He's so little, and so it was so cool. But I remember being that age and watching it and loving it. How does it feel for you, decades later, to have been part of something that has passed down that people love? It's a generational classic. But also, is it, I don't know, is it sobering for you too, the fact that like so many, have passed away that were in the film, but also the others are really old now. You go to 90s and 100. So
Right.
how does that feel?
Well, what a privilege, really, to be associated, to have your name attached to something that is kind of eternal in a strange way. It's certainly timeless.
Yeah.
The movie's gone on and on and on. I just turned 70 in November. And as you say, Dick and Julie, well, Julie's in her late 90s and Dick just turned 100. So for any of us, the fact we're still here is amazing. In life in general, because life does throw us all these kind of slings and arrows. But yeah, it's a joy, it's a privilege to be associated with stuff like that. I made my first film when I was 6 for Disney called The Three Lives of Thomasina. It was about me and a cat, and cute little film, and carried on working till I was 26, and then I've been merrily retired ever since. But that's the one that always stands out for people because it's an incredible film, absolute classic. So what a lucky girl, to be associated with something that brings so much joy to people, which was exactly Walt Disney's intention. And in terms of the theme of the film, I think he wanted something deeper, family healing to happen.
Yeah.
The kind of neglect that the kids were under, and the stress the parents were under. That's a topic that is as current today, if not even more so.
Yeah. No, I remember that, and I mean, um, I think I it was so interesting because my dad worked a lot growing
Did he?
up, and so it was, the banker, um, is Mr. Banks.
Right.
He's very, it was as a kid, I just remember relating a lot to, them wanting him to spend time with them and just,
Mm,
him being tired and kinda cranky when he would get home, and,
right.
um, I thought that was just it it's very sweet, and of course, the ending, it was always very sweet to
It's
me,
lovely.
that he loves them and they come
Yeah.
together.
They go fly
Um
a kite, and
Yeah,
their
they
family,
do.
and then Mary Poppins' work is done. Jane and Michael have their parents back, and the mum who's trying to make a life for herself outside of the children with her suffragette movement. And again, I think it's a timely film. It hasn't gone out of fashion because of that, because women are expected and want to have their own careers more today than certainly in the era of that film. But it shows, that notion and that topic has been going on for decades and decades. That women want to do something outside of just the home,
Yeah.
and that it can lead to a great deal of stress and neglect, and people being run down and not being what they'd intended a family to be. But they put it all together in the end, and that's the message.
Yeah, and the mom, when you mentioned the mom, because I loved her, was it I don't remember the actress's name now.
Glynis Johns was her name.
Yes.
Yeah, she
Oh,
only died a couple of. Actually, is she gone? I'm not quite sure. Can't remember if Glynis is gone or not. But if not, she's again very, very. Obviously everybody was 30 years older than me at the time, so inevitably we're going to lose them as the years go by. But
yeah.
again, they have a kind of immortality because of their work in movies like that.
No, yeah, I think she did pass away a couple years ago, I
Did she?
remember
Yeah.
it sticking out to me, but um interestingly, at the end, her passions don't die, but I think she really does realize how important it is that her children be involved and be a part of her life.
Yeah.
And Mr. Banks realizes that. It's not like he, decides not to make money anymore for the family. That's not the message of it. But it was very much more like we can do this as a unit and we can work
Yeah.
together. And I did want to ask you, because it's true, since you grew up to now, women definitely have a much more independent, at least it's an aura of independence. I'm not sure all
Mm.
women would we are shown a lot of those ads or movies about women in career life, and there are a lot of them, but I do think there are also a lot who just, or I don't even want to say just, but are wives and mothers. And so
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not sure how the percentage looks between career and not, but I wondered for you, seeing the difference since you were growing up to now, do you think the difference has been this emphasis on career has been a good thing, or do you think it's been too much on one side, not enough? What's kind of been your perspective? Because you,
Yeah.
interestingly, didn't keep acting after, your late 20s. You became a mom and you stayed in the family structure as
Yeah.
opposed to going on to the career.
Right.
So, what do
But
you
that was a
think?
choice. I
Yeah.
definitely was asked to continue to work in England, especially. I made movies, and my last film was called The 39 Steps, and I was
Mhm.
lucky enough to win awards for that in England. And so I was definitely still a film actress, but I wanted to be a mum. And I think probably
Hmm.
that was based on the fact that I grew up in an acting family and was put to work, if you will, young.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that for my kids. I wanted them to have a very present mum. And I didn't want them to have to work until they were, of the age, past the age of 18, and to have a fun childhood. I'm not saying I didn't have a fun childhood, But it was disproportionate to my peers,
Right.
private jets and fancy lifestyle and all that. It wasn't normal and it wasn't natural. And I wanted better, if you will, for my kids. But to answer your question about women and careers, I think our liberation, if you will, from the kitchen is in its infancy. I think it's hard to say if that's going well or not so well. It's almost case by case.
Yeah.
And it's a very bloody hard job. Being a mom is a hard job, and having a career is a hard job. And how women do both, I have no clue. Hats off. But I think, something has to suffer because, I know girlfriends of mine, when we were mutually raising our kids, they were at the office till like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night.
Hmm.
And, there's nothing wrong with having nannies, et cetera, et cetera. I had one to help me, even though I was a stay at home, because I had three kids under the age of 5, and I couldn't get the one to one school and the other to another, so. But
Yeah.
that's all privileged stuff. The most people have to do all that work themselves, and financially more than ever before, people need the income. For families to be able to afford to get on the property ladder and, have a good existence. It takes a dual income very, very often today.
Yeah.
So that's sad. And obviously, you talk about statistics and what are they like. I don't think we've got the correct statistics for any of these changes since the 60s, if you will. But I think the birth rate's down, and a lot of people are deciding not to have families. And I think, as a Western civilization, we're probably in danger of being overrun by other countries, etc. I don't think we're keeping up the birth rate to the level of the death rate. So
Hmm.
that's a little bit dodgy from the stats I've read, for what it's worth. That more people have to be born, and not that 2.5 or whatever the amount is. But that's all outside of my expertise. I haven't got a clue. I just did what I felt was right. Get married and have kids. It's fun.
Well, I was gonna say to you, it's so interesting to me because, in Mary Poppins is your nanny, because your parents, the parents in the film are just not really present. So you
Right.
come in after they, keep getting rid of other nannies because they're too hard to work with the kids, and the kids are just trying to get attention, which is why they're not good with the nannies. And it's so interesting to hear you say how much you wanted your kids to have a childhood because that's what Mary Poppins did for the kids.
Yes.
She wanted them to imagine and to create things and to think outside the box about everything, which
Yes.
was so encouraging. And like she sang to them, things that are just really back to the simple, days where there wasn't even radio or anything, and people would do that. They would sing to their children, help them sleep, tell them stories.
Yes.
Um, and so do you, like, as a kid, when you were in the movie, playing a kid that isn't the norm in the sense of wanting, you had your nanny and wanting, um, a closer, just a more normal childhood, more typical childhood, everyone
Yes.
together doing fun things. That must have been kind of interesting because I'd feel like you would start feeling personally attached to the story.
Yeah, if movies were shot in sequence, probably, but because everything's sort of jumbled up when you make a film, you do like the end in the middle or so you don't have you're not seeing a story as such when you're working, every
That's
day
true,
is,
yeah.
so it's not sequential. So I don't think at age 8 or 9 that I had the emotional intelligence to figure any of that out. I just knew it was a really happy work environment. Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke were so much fun and so loving and sweet. Julie was very loving, as was Uncle Walt Disney, who was on set most days. He was very, very proud of this project. He'd spent 20 years trying to acquire the rights for the novels of Mary Poppins. So
Yeah.
it was a big struggle for him, and he did it for his kids because his kids knew the books when they were little. So it was just it was a very meaningful set. And, on set, normally on a movie set, the crew, they're all running around doing what they have to do to set up a scene. But, they were really still and they watched. Even as a youngster, I was very aware that the crew were watching what we were doing. And behind the big camera, you could see all these smiling faces and people kind of getting choked up. And Uncle Walt was there watching his movie being made most days. And so it was a very tender and dear and precious environment, unlike
Hmm.
any other film that I made, and I made a few. So I think it was hitting home to a lot of people, a lot of adults. And that's what the movies released did. A lot of adults figured, okay, I took my kids to see this film. The message was sort of over their heads, but what's the message for the parents, spend
Hmm.
some time. It doesn't have to cost money, tuppence for paper and string. You can have yourself a new set of wings. That's one of the lyrics for "Let's Go Fly a Kite," and I think that's the point. You don't have to have a ton of money. In my travels, Danielle, I've been lucky enough to go a lot around the world, and China, India, Africa, they all have, or South America, people have much simpler lives than we
Yes.
do. And they're not, because they can't, trying to accrue stuff. And I think you see, I've got a lot of Mexican friends back in LA where we live half the time. And I think they're all having happier lives than, this sort of Western world where have I got a new car? Did I get one for my wife, or did she get one for me? Or what, what do we have? And I've seen in the huts in Africa, families all living together in a hut. Now, that's not ideal either, but they have a love and care for each other, and a sense of community that we've kind of lost in this world in which we live,
Yes,
which
that's
is why
true.
we rely on things like podcasts or the internet or whatever to keep us connected, to Instagram or Facebook, whatever, to give us a family, a community. But the rest of the world does that without needing all those trappings. And so I think we've lost a lot over the years. And I think people in general are kind of lonely and sad. We need Mary Poppins to come back.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I was gonna say, what do you do? Because now, you do it's interesting because obviously you were able to live in a time where we didn't have every trapping we have now and continue to have because we're always coming out with something all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but you also are living in the time now where you're seeing it. And so and you can get it and have access to it and you have your kids that are grown up and they're doing their own thing and so all these things are coming around and doing this podcast, all that stuff. How do you connect with people apart from, is there something that you maybe term old fashioned that you like to do to stay connected to people on a more personal level apart from?
Mm. Well, actually, I'm a lousy example for that because I'm kind of an isolationist. I maybe because I had such a busy childhood with so many people in it, or after attention or work or whatever, that as an adult I definitely isolate.
Hmm.
I'm not good at that at all, so I'm a rotten person to ask. I like my family, and I've got a smattering of friends, but I'm a lousy friend. I don't stay in touch. I'm completely there for anybody who needs me. But I mean, this where I am right now in Florida. We bought this house last year. I don't know anybody in Florida. There's one 85-year-old cousin, um, and I've got to make friends here. I have to make an effort, and I think that's very the way the world is now. We have to make an effort. Am I on social media all the time? Absolutely. Is that a waste of my time? Absolutely. And do I check to see how many people liked my Insta? Yes, because I'm a loser. But it's real life people. I'm also at fault there, where my little coterie, my social media coterie, is my safety valve, and real life humans outside the door. I'm not very good at making that connection either. So,
Yeah.
but I've had my day. But for young people, that's got to be hard, because that's what we need as humans. We need human connection.
Yeah.
As I say, I've got three kids. None of them's even really dating right now. A little bit here and there, but and they're the last one's 29, the others are 30 and 35, and it's not that I worry about that, because they're all great people and they'll find their right person. But are they missing out on what I had in my 20s? Hell yeah. Going out to discos and meeting lots of guys and gals, and people inviting people to things. There was much more partying, and I don't mean that in a let's do drugs kind of way, but there was much more. That was what you had to do. You didn't have the internet to keep you
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
So on a Friday and Saturday night, you were going to so and so's, then they were going to, we had stuff going on all the time, and you didn't have to work so hard to find a date or human companionship, which is a dichotomy, because now you can definitely find a date because you can join dating sites and stuff, but you don't have the power of veto of your friends telling you, oh, that's a good guy, or she's nice, or whatever. You don't have that.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, you'd marry within the village pretty much, or date within the village. And now you've got the whole world, which makes it kind of dodgy.
Yeah. Overwhelming.
Totally. Because there's human nature to think, all right, is this the one? Or should I be with that guy I just went out with from Bangladesh, or Upper Bechuana, like whatever. There's so many people, and so easy to not to connect to them, but the choices. There's too many choices. And how do you narrow that down for the one, if we still believe that's a thing?
Yeah.
How do you find that person that is going to be your match? And back in the day, I think Indians had it the best way. The parents would matchmake you, and you'd meet people who were probably similar to you and had like morals, like interests, and your parents kind of cut the middleman out. I'm not saying that that should happen anymore, because that wasn't a good way either. But there was some comfort in that. You didn't have
Right.
to put yourself out there and keep searching and searching. And it's like trying to find the treasure of the Sierra Madre these days. I don't know how any of you kids find, a loved one.
Well, also, I think it is definitely it is interesting now because if um, I definitely think women in a way do have a much more powerful sense of fear about losing a dream if they get married. Like they want to get
Mm,
married, but they also don't want to give up on things they love that they've done
yeah,
before they were married. And so then they want to find someone who's encouraging in that dream. But then obviously what does happen too is you do have to allow the dreams to be different because they typically don't work out the way you imagined as
right,
life goes on. Um and that is difficult. It's hard to accept sometimes, even after you get married, but even before, I think that is even maybe a stump for a lot of people is just this fear of having to figure it all out beforehand. I mean, I know I was like that. And I couldn't figure it out beforehand because there was just no way to predict. And it just kind of came down to, do I want this person in my life? And even if my dreams look very different, or
yeah,
do I prefer the dreams more than the person? Because if you do prefer your dreams more than the person, then person's probably not that great, or not for you.
right.
Um, but I do think there is a sacrificial element to it that is scary and it's hard. But also, I think you do catastrophize it in your mind because it ends up not being as terrible as you think. Like your dreams just take a very different shape sometimes, but it's not like they're
Right.
gone.
Well, and look at you look at everybody else's world with Instagram and stuff, and because that people only post their good days,
Yeah.
um, you get a very fake sense of what relationship is like. You only see people looking trim and cool next to a beach. You didn't see the flaming fight they had 3 hours before when they were throwing saucepans. It's just
Yes. Yeah.
it's all idealized, and I think that's a lot of pressure. I think there's a lot of pressure on men too to try to be everything for women, and then women, you've got the time clock going, which is totally unfair. So by the time you're 40, you've got to have it all figured out, and have had a
Yeah.
meaningful career, and then you're supposed to just give that up when you got to the top of the ladder. It's so complicated. And I'm glad I grew up when I did, but I worry for my kids. Uh, how do they narrow down, or how do they? It's almost like you have to lower your expectations. My generation grew up with, the handsome prince coming in on a white horse, and that was all fake too. But for this generation, for your age group, there's a handsome prince with blonde hair, with red hair, with black hair. You've got different color skin. Whatever. All of these flipping choices. How do you know? How do you know? Well, the answer is you don't. You don't know, and none of us know. You find your partner and you have kids, and you hope the kids come out okay, but none of it's guaranteed, and work isn't guaranteed. The whole of life has always been precarious. You've just got to you take it with a spoonful of sugar, right?
Well, I was gonna ask because you mentioned earlier before we started, your LA home and
Yeah.
escaping during the fires, and I remember I remember that time vividly in part because people I had scheduled to interview were like, can't do it anymore. I'm so sorry. Like, this is just, I'm not there. And
Right.
then secondly, I remember I reached out to one person. She wrote back and said, I just lost my home. I'm not doing
Right.
any podcasts. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then, but I do remember talking with Lucy Arnez at the time because
Hmm.
I don't remember where she was located in California, but it wasn't near the fires,
Right.
um, at least near enough for damage. And she was just telling me about how it had rocked her world, even just not losing a house, but just seeing
Yeah.
all her friends and family
Oh,
members and just the hard that she was seeing around her. And she felt like she herself was in this mode of like, what's happening to our world? Like
yes.
it was a very turbulent year.
It was
2025 was
crazy. Yeah.
incredible in many ways, and you know there's so many things on that. But anyway, I did want to, when you mentioned that, I mean, how was that in your relationship with your husband, like having to go through something so hard and out of your control?
Yeah.
Um, did
Well,
you
for us, for our relationship, I don't think it was hard because at our ages, so many, you realize with age, everything's out of your control.
yeah.
So it's another thing that you put on the checklist of life. Okay, fire burning house, check. What? Flooding your home, check. The longer you live, the more shit's going to happen. And, you know, so it didn't affect us so much. I mean, as with anything, if you've got a good partner, you pull together, that's, or good friends, whatever your relationship, people are supposed to rally around. But it was this time last year, and we were at our house in Maine, and we got the call that our house in Malibu had to be evacuated. Now, we weren't living there, but we had pets there. We had birds. I entered animal rescue, and I've rescued a lot of birds. So we had big aviaries there, bird aviaries. And there was nobody to go up. We're on the top of the mountain in Malibu, and nobody wanted to go up these windy roads with the hillsides on fire to go rescue them. And God bless two of my kids and a friend of theirs. They literally drove through the fire. I mean, through flames, in and out of flames, to get up the mountain with boxes to bundle up all the different types of
Oh.
birds. And then, of course, the fire had got even worse. And then going kind of off ATVing their cars down the hill, and totally weren't allowed to go up at all, but they did to save the animals. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, that was cool because I admired their bravery, and I liked the way they pitched up in a circumstance. Fortunately, they didn't tell me at the time, or else I would have killed them, taking such risks. But so like anything else in life, you just get through it. It's I'm in a place of such gratitude, Danielle, because 4 years ago I had breast cancer, and you just don't know where that's going to go. I mean, thank God. I'm coming up to 5 years of everything being fine, but I think that's what life is. You have to expect stuff is going to happen, and you have to kind of gird your loins in advance, as Lucia Inez was averring to. You have to expect stuff's going to go down,
Yeah.
and when it does, turn inward and turn towards your family or partner or friends or whatever for help, and hopefully you've got a bit of spirituality to help you through it too. But it's that is just life. It's going to happen.
Well, I know for several women I've spoken with, like the breast cancer diagnosis for them was like the hardest time of their life for some people.
Yeah.
It was the scariest time. Um, my grandmother had breast cancer. She ended
Mm.
up having other cancers as well. She passed away from cancer.
Mm.
And so it's very like there's no guarantees, like you said, especially with cancer. There's just not a no one can say, okay, they could say they're optimistic, but nobody's gonna say you're gonna live,
No,
that.
not at all.
Can I ask for you, was that the hardest moment for you to gird up your loins, as you put it? Was that kind of very just like, how do I handle this? How do I?
Yeah. It's a shock. But cancer is everywhere, so it can't be that much of a shock. It was strange because my younger sister Yvette, she had called me in the November saying, "I've got some bad news. I have ovarian cancer." And I was like,
Uh,
"Oh my God, that's terrible! Shock, shock, shock." 2 months later, I'm calling her saying, "Oh God, guess what? I've got breast cancer." So actually, it was a very moving 4 years because we went through everything. She was in England, I was in LA, but we would talk literally every day and help each
wow.
other through the moments of whether it was chemo or surgeries or all of the fears and the hopes. And so I would advise anybody who gets that diagnosis, get into a group of people, whether it's on Facebook or whatever, talk to other people who are going through it, because mine didn't seem so scary because I could call my sister and go, "Oh, this sucks. What did they do to you today?" Or, "Well, they did this to me," et cetera, et cetera. So, and that was the hardest thing of last year because she actually lost her fight and she
I'm
passed away
sorry.
last May. So it's all checks and balances. Deal with the moment, whatever the moment is in life. None of us is going to live forever, and the chances of getting in and out of here without some kind of catastrophe are slim to nothing. So just lean on other people when you go through stuff. And I was lucky, sad that it was my sister, but I was lucky to have that. You know, literally long distance. We were holding back each other's hair when we were throwing up from chemo. It was so you just find people who are going to help you through moments in life, whatever the moment is, and what's going to be is going to be, but just get through the day and make the most out of each day. It's all cliched, but it's true. It's tomorrow is not guaranteed, so have a good time today. Try to help somebody else. Try to create memories for yourself and for others, and just spread freaking love. And again, I think that's what Mary Poppins was about. It was love each other and give love to other people. Be loving, be kind, and that's all any of us are meant to do. That's all we can do because we have no flipping control over anything otherwise.
Yeah. Did you have a survivor guilt in a way that she? Because I
for
don't know
sure.
how I would handle that. Is a horrible
Yeah,
to, to both walk through it together at
yeah.
almost the same time. And then
Yeah.
I mean, how did you, first of all, how would you approach coming, how did you do it with your sister of like, oh, I'm in remission, and you knew she wasn't?
Well, unfortunately, she knew from the get go that her cancer was terminal. She was told
Okay.
that straight up and down. And
Okay.
so I felt survivor guilt from the minute I got cancer, knowing that mine was caught early and that the chances were in my favor. So I felt guilty for the whole 4 years in our journey because my expectations were from my oncologist that I was going to be okay, and hers never were. She had a very rare cancer, and so she was just. I remember when she told me she had cancer, I said, obviously the stupid things one says, like, well, what can I do? And she said,
Yeah.
you can find somebody for me who's survived this for longer than 4 years. That's how little time she had left. And she knew that going in, which it was amazing. I mean, she was so bloody brilliant because she was so sanguine with all of that. And her thing, a very, very bright, beautiful gal with 3 kids herself, but grown. And her thing was just, she said this phrase over and over. It drove me mental. It is what it is, Karen. It is what it is. And that she's right. It is what it is. Wishing, hoping, expecting a different outcome. It's kind of a waste of time. So she just did the most with the time that she had. And I admire that very much because I think I'm more clingy than that. I would be trying to, squeeze everything out of it and, oh, poor me and pity party, whatever. But she was just cooler than that.
Well,
But survivor's guilt, hell yeah.
yeah. Well, I was gonna ask you, I mean, it's interesting if they said it was terminal, she still wanted to go through like all of the treatment to try.
I know. Well, I can understand that because I think the will to live, well, I mean, we all know the will to live is the strongest will there is. You look at these awful fires that just happened in the nightclub in Switzerland and how desperate people were to survive that moment, as we all are. You'll do anything. But what's wonderful about people is we'll do anything and try to help others whilst we're doing it. There's that the stories that have come out of Switzerland of people going back into the fire to help their friends, etc., and sometimes losing their own lives. I think people in general are just good, and we do try to help each other through life. And when the chips are down, you hear this about train crashes, plane crashes, or whatever, people helping others. And so, in general, I've got good faith in humankind. I think we're good people.
That's so hard. I don't.
No,
I,
well,
well, I want to be, here's the thing. I believe, I mean, you probably know this looking at the podcast a bit, obviously,
yeah.
I'm a Christian, and so I believe in God, and I believe in this idea of him, um, coming to save mankind through the cross. But one thing that I find very interesting is, of course, I find so many things in people that are beautiful. There's almost nothing. Some people, well, let me be honest here. Many people in my life, especially growing up, it was very hard to find something to really, you know, something to be admirable of a person.
Hmm.
But the older I've gotten, and which I know is not much, so I'm sorry, that didn't mean to be offensive to you and your age, but
No, no,
the
no, no,
older
no.
I've
I'm lucky to
gotten,
be here, girl.
um, and seeing, um, understanding what people have gone through, but also being able to see the moments where I see the image of God reflected in people by, like, for instance, going in and saving someone in a fire, or someone smiling at me randomly as I'm walking down the street when I'm, just most people just ignore you now because we're
Yeah.
we're really plugged in. But now and then someone will say something. I always, it was, I don't know how many months ago it was, but I was in the supermarket and I was in my zone. I don't expect to talk to anyone at the supermarket. I always do self-checkout. I don't talk to anybody. I just go
You're
get my
my
stuff.
kind of girl. I love it.
Yeah, well, the crazy thing was is somebody was passing me by and all of a sudden they went, "I like your dress." But
Mm.
I was so taken aback that I was talked to that by the time I had enough processing time to say thank you, they were gone. And I was like,
Mm.
"You talked to me in the
Yeah.
supermarket?" It was like, "What just happened?"
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I I think
Isn't that
especially
sad though?
it
Isn't
is.
that sad?
Yes, it is very
And this
sad.
actually drives my kids crazy, because I talk to everybody. And again, I said earlier, I'm an isolationist. But when I'm out and about, I'd be that woman in the supermarket or with the Uber driver asking them about their world. I am that person. And I think as a Christian, that's kind of my responsibility to create that sense of interest and safety and community, wherever I am. That is important to me. I think being nice and kind, and I was in a restaurant the other day, and three girls were coming out dressed up to their nines and tiny little mini skirts and high heels and all of this. And they'd worked so hard to look that good. And, a lot of women my age, you could see were going, and I thought, oh, come on, you old bat. They look sorry, they look incredible. They look so knockout. And so I said that to them. I said, you girls, oh my God, you are rocking it. You look so cool. And my kids were dying of like, oh, Mom, stop talking to strangers. But, I think it's important. I think if you feel somebody's doing something nice, comment on it. It's a good thing. It might make somebody's day. It stuck with you that somebody did that,
Yeah.
gave you a compliment that you didn't expect, or it's not even about the compliment; it's about the connection.
Yeah, and that's what I love about kids. I think that's,
Mm.
and I mean, I know it always goes back to Mary Poppins, but it's kids, obviously a kid can grow up very fast depending on what happens to them, but
Yeah,
kids are very innocent and it's interesting. Obviously, growing up, parents are very much like, make sure you don't talk to strangers, which is totally a good thing in the sense of you want them to, because unfortunately, our society now, kid can't walk down the street and be
yeah,
guaranteed to come home. Um,
uh,
but kids just naturally, though, don't think that. They
yeah,
just think if someone says hello, they must be a nice person. They must want to talk with me. They must want my good. Like they're just
yeah.
naturally very curious,
Optimistic.
sweet. Yeah,
Hmm.
optimistic. And I love that. And I think it's so important as adults, even though we have been hurt and struggle. And there are, as you said, you've experienced life and the pain of it more. You still do have those childlike moments. Like when even when you get to, as a mother, I haven't had this yet, but a lot of times when I've talked to some moms, they've said they love playing with their children because then they go back to being a kid because they can
Yes.
make up a story with them, or they go into the world of a child and suddenly everything is so simple.
Oh, it's
Um,
the best. It's unbelievable, and it's very
yeah,
pure.
yeah,
And I think it's what God intends for us, that kind of simplicity and love. My favorite thing with the kids growing up, it wasn't so much the bedtime stories at night, but it was they would say to me every night, "Okay, Mom, tell us about when you were naughty." And this was our nighttime ritual. I had to make up so many stories because I wasn't really very naughty. I was an English girl and very well behaved and raised to, mind my manners, etc. So it really fed into my imagination. I recommend it when you have kids of just make up stuff about when you were naughty, and their eyes are open wide, like, oh, and obviously don't make it silly or dangerous stuff, but your imagination goes riot of what you maybe it's your alter ego of what they would have liked to have done. It's but it's great, the innocence of children, and I think that's actually what Walt Disney captured, whether it's in Disneyland, Disney World, his movies. He captured that innocence. And he was a very wise man. I was lucky enough that he really liked me, and he would set aside time for me to have lunch with him, just the two of us. Um, you know, Head of a studio who actually it turned out was dying of lung cancer when I last saw him. But I've seen his diaries and archives, and it's lunch with Karen Dotrice. And, he would just, the two of us would go have lunch together. And he taught me a lot of lessons in life. And there was one example, which was, I'd go to his office and he was coughing. What none of us realized at the time, because he didn't know himself, was he had lung cancer, and was not going to be long for this earth. But so this time I went to have lunch with him, and he's coughing. And I was obviously worried about that as a kid, and said to him, Uncle Walt, I know what we should do. And I stood up and I started to push his great big desk towards the door where you enter his office. I said, "Can you help me? Let's put your desk nearer to the front door so you don't have to walk so far, and then you wouldn't cough." Again, the innocence of children is so cute. I thought, "Oh, you poor old man." He was only 60. I said, "You poor old man, you can't make it across the room." But what I loved about him, because don't treat children like they're not aware. His response to that statement that I made, let's move your desk closer to the door. And I said, well, why not? Why don't we move it closer to the door? And he said, well, Karen, by the time and this dates me because everybody smoked cigars back then. He said, by the time those cigar chewing executives have made it over to my desk, they've lost the courage to ask me what they were going to ask. So, there I was, like 8 or 9, and the great Walt Disney is teaching me life lessons. And that's exactly what we should do as parents. Kids aren't dumb. They're very cognizant of the world. And, what he said in that moment and many other occasions really resonated. He taught me a life lesson through the eyes of a child, just about posturing and holding your space and your power, which he had to do as the head of a studio. And but I thought that was cool that he entrusted me with that knowledge. He obviously
Yeah,
thought I could handle it, you know. And I've
yeah.
remembered it all these years, so 60 years later.
That is, but also what a sweet thing that
So
you
sweet.
thought if you moved the desk closer, you wouldn't
Oh,
walk as much. Obviously, it's so funny too because you weren't even thinking like, well, he opens the door and then how far does he have to walk to other things?
right.
But
Yeah,
you're like,
exactly.
but if
Yeah.
I fix this one problem,
Yeah.
then he'll be
It'll all
better.
be fine. That's it. And that's children for you. They see their parents go through stuff. And again, that's what the kids see in Mary Poppins. Their dad goes to the bank and gets fired, and his hat punched in, and his tie all disheveled, and yet he
Yeah.
finds a laugh out of it. He ends up laughing and flying a kite because he just goes, oh, sod it. Is it all that important at the end of the day? And I think that is a big lesson of the film. Take it all with a pinch of salt. Yeah, how are we going to pay the bills next month? I don't know. Somehow one does, and very often with prayer and commitment, and again, community, your church community or whatever your religion is, can help you through these sort of moments if you turn towards people. But there are places set up to help people in distress, and which we're seeing with the fires in LA. We lost in our neighborhood so many churches, so many places for people to meet, and yet they found other spaces to get together to worship. Whether it was a hall or something somewhere, or even for a while people were meeting on the street corners because it was LA and the weather was good. But just you can get through pretty much anything if you find your community, if you find people. So having said I'm an isolationist, when the stuff hits the fan, I turn towards my church anyway.
Well, maybe you're a recovering isolationist. You don't seem like you really like being an isolation, or like you take pride in that statement.
Yeah, yeah, I do.
And I
Well,
think it's okay. I have moments where I need isolation, or I just feel very overwhelmed or overstimulated by so many things going on, and I do
sure.
need that time with a book, or just like,
Yes.
in the quiet. Like, I love playing crossword puzzles, like just
Oh, me
sometimes
too.
you just I don't think it's wrong if you do that. I think it's if that's your lifestyle where you don't want to talk to people, there's always like why, because there's always a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do like you. I think it is important though to take those times to think, reflect. And some people are so busy, so social, they don't reflect at all. And
I
so
know.
it
Oh,
terrifies them to be alone.
very much so. And they just need constant affirmation. We have this summer home in Maine where I like to be there off season when all the summer people aren't there. Um, but it's a non-stop round of cocktail parties and people small, it's the smallest of small talk all the time, and to me it's all meaningless, and I'm not saying I'm better than, I'm just saying it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not that interested in that kind of stuff. It hasn't got the depth that I personally require. If I'm going to have a conversation, I want it to be like this, where it's interesting, where we cover something beyond, did you park your boat yet? Oh, yes. It's like,
Oh
so what?
goodness.
I know. It's just so facile.
I'm sorry, were you asked that question before? That'd be terrible.
I know. Yeah.
I
Whereas,
don't have a boat, so.
I know, I know. Well, my boat is smaller than everybody else's boat. But it's just, it, it's just a different lot of priorities, and I think it's the influence of a life. And I, again, I'll go back giving Uncle Walt a great deal of credit, and Julie and Dick, of showing me the way of how to survive being a child actor,
Huh.
and yet still have a moral compass, still want to, I don't drink, I'm a Christian, I'm not a bad girl, never have been. I mean, the press back in England were always trying to set me up in some way to make me do something bad, or try to portray me as being, which happens even more today to young actors. But they couldn't get me on anything. Squeaky clean, Snow White. But yeah, and I think that's a lot of what I hope I've imbued in my daughter, to hold yourself as a very precious thing, to not give yourself away too much to anybody in whatever capacity, to hold on to your center, and not post pictures of you in mini skirts on Instagram or whatever, just have some decorum, be a lady. And I think I've raised my sons to respect that as well. They're not looking at bad stuff, because I think they've got good hearts and good centers. They're not. If you've got that kind of value, hopefully it rubs off. Hopefully they pay attention to that.
I know, look who's
I
here.
love it. Who is that?
Nightly. Nightly, say hello.
Natalie.
Oh,
I love it.
Nightly.
Oh,
Like,
Knightley. I thought you said
like,
Natalie. Hi,
like,
Knightley.
like,
Look at that
Austin?
markings. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I
Mr.
love it.
Knightley.
Look at those markings. Oh, that's a special baby. Nice butt.
I know.
You see that, right? I know. Why do cats always do that? I've got one walking around here somewhere too. Actually, I shooed him out of the room. It was a cat that I rescued in China,
Oh,
in
wow.
Shanghai. Yeah, so his name is Chairman Meow. Um, Wherever
I
he
love
is.
it.
Yeah, had to do it. Found him in a park in Shanghai, and spent an absolute fortune getting him shipped to America and waiting for him to be big enough to get, but animals are the best because look at the honesty of that. That
I
thing
know.
comes in, claims you for his own, rubs himself all over you, shows everybody his bottom, and then disappears. That's honesty right there. You
I
can't beat it, can you?
no, no. I will never be able to show people my butt, though. I don't think I'll go
Well,
there.
well, so at your age would be a better time than at mine. So if you're ever going to do it, please do it sooner than later, darling.
That's right.
If you're going to
Well,
move your audience, make it quick.
yeah. Well, Karen, it's been such a delight to talk to you. I think
And you too.
it's so fun and wow. I mean, who knew we'd end it with butts? Such a good
Oh, it was always a
round hole of a
guarantee.
topic.
Yeah. I think you should do that always. You should have a butt ending. You should end your show, but.
Everyone, turn around.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. On the count of 3. Well, I'll spare your audience and not do that today, but
no.
Thank you very much for talking to me. It's an absolute pleasure. You're a star. I think you're amazing and a complete delight, and you're a kind of beacon of hope for young people. So, and it's a beacon of hope for somebody my age to see there's people like you out there and spreading a good word.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, thank you, Karen. Have a blessed day.
And
Bye.
to you too. Take care. Bye-bye.